After 48 hours of searching through a devastating blizzard, the rescue team declared that Camille Mercer, CEO of North Star Dynamics, had almost certainly not survived. Her SUV was found crushed at the edge of a ravine on Route 16. No body, no footprints, no phone signal. The temperature had dropped below -20 degrees, and a second storm was already moving in. One by one, the searchers came down from the mountain. The incident commander radioed the final call, "There's nothing left to find up there. We pull out now." Everyone obeyed. Everyone except Everett Cole, a black single father who operated a snowplow for the county and knew these mountains better than most men knew their own backyards. Before turning back, he walked to the wreckage one last time. That was when he saw it. A small streak of frozen blood on a pine branch nearly 200 meters from the crash site. What had Everett seen that every trained rescuer had missed? If this story already has your attention, you're exactly where you need to be. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. Every week we bring you real human moments, ordinary people who refuse to quit when it matters most. There are more stories waiting for you, and every single one of them is worth your time. Everett Cole was already on Route 16 when the call came through. He was running the county snowplow on the overnight shift slow passes through the dark, the blade scraping ice from asphalt while Cedar Ridge slept. He knew every curve of this road, the way other men knew the inside of their own homes. He knew where the guardrails were missing, where the runoff turned to black ice before dawn, where the mountain pressed in close enough to make even experienced drivers hesitate. The radio crackled at 4:17 in the morning. A vehicle had gone off Route 16 near Miller's Curve. Possible casualty, search and rescue requesting all available personnel. Everett pulled the plow to the shoulder, radioed his foreman, and drove toward the site. By the time he arrived, 2 sheriff's vehicles and a fire unit were already there. The SUV had gone through the guardrail and rolled partway down the ravine, not far enough to reach the bottom, but far enough to be unreachable without ropes. The driver's side window was shattered. The airbag had deployed. On the passenger seat, still in plain sight, sat a leather tote bag and a phone with a cracked screen. No driver, no blood trail leading away from the vehicle, no footprints in the snow beyond the road. The incident commander, Captain Briggs, was organizing a perimeter sweep. He nodded at Everett as he approached. "Cole, you know this ridge better than anyone. I need you on the northeast slope." Everett looked at the SUV for a long moment before he answered. "Who was driving?" One of the deputies checked his notepad. "Mercer. Camille Mercer. Runs a tech company out of San Francisco. Her assistant called it in when she didn't show for a meeting and stopped answering her phone." Another deputy standing near the edge of the road shook his head slowly. "No emergency contact on file except a law firm. Woman's probably worth more than this whole county, and the only person who noticed she was gone was her lawyer." Everett didn't respond to that. He walked to the guardrail and looked down at the wreckage, at the snow already beginning to settle over the crumpled hood. He had stood at a railing like this before, not at this exact spot, but close enough. 4 years ago, another call had come through on another winter night, and another vehicle had gone off another stretch of this same road. The search team had worked through the dark for 3 hours before the weather forced them to stop. They told him they would go back at first light. They did. But by then, it was already too late. Everett turned away from the guardrail and headed for the northeast slope. Before he left for the day's first sweep, he drove 10 minutes south to Cedar Ridge Elementary, signed Tessa out of class early, and brought her to Ruth Lawson's house. Ruth was Lena's mother, a quiet woman who communicated mostly through coffee cups and unlocked doors. She met Everett on the porch and took Tessa's bag without a word. Tessa was 8 years old and had her mother's eyes, dark brown, steady, the kind that looked at you like she already knew what you were about to say. She stood on Ruth's porch steps and watched her father with an expression that was too careful for her age. "How long will you be gone?" she asked. "Don't know yet," Everett said. He crouched in front of her. "You remember what I taught you, the signal?" Tessa straightened without being asked. "3 short, 3 long, 3 short." And if you ever hear that signal radio scanner anywhere, what do? Tell the person in charge, right away, don't wait. Everett nodded. It was a ritual they ran through every time he went out on a dangerous call, not to frighten her, but because Everett Cole believed in preparation the way other people believed in luck. He had learned the hard way that luck ran out. He kissed her on the top of her head, told Ruth he would call when he had an update, and drove back toward the mountain. The first day of searching produced nothing. Helicopters swept the ridge. Search dogs worked the perimeter below the crash site. 12 volunteers combed the trees on foot, moving in slow, parallel lines through knee-deep snow. The temperature dropped steadily through the afternoon, and by evening a second storm system was visible on the horizon, a gray wall building behind the mountains to the northwest. Everett spent the day working the area east of the crash site terrain most of the team had dismissed because the slope was too steep and the snow too unstable. He moved with his eyes down, reading the ground the way his father had taught him, looking not for what was there, but for what had been disturbed. By nightfall, he had found nothing. He went home and slept 4 hours. The second day brought a larger team and worse results. Drones were grounded by mid-afternoon because the wind was too strong for safe flight. By early evening, the second storm had arrived ahead of schedule, and an avalanche warning had been issued for the northeast slope. Captain Briggs called all units in. Everett watched the other vehicles pull out one by one, headlights sweeping the dark tree line as they turned toward the valley road. He stood by his truck long after the last one was gone. Then he walked back to the crash site. He wasn't entirely sure what he was looking for. He had examined the vehicle twice already, but he looked anyway. That was when he found them. 3 details that the rest of the team had missed. The seatbelt on the driver's side hadn't simply unclipped. The strap near the buckle had been cut clean. The kind of clean edge that came from a blade, not from impact damage. Someone had cut themselves free from this vehicle deliberately. They hadn't been thrown out. He checked the rear compartment. The emergency kit was still there, first aid supplies, a pair of gloves, but the thermal blanket was gone. He checked twice. Missing. He turned and walked northeast along the road, flashlight sweeping both sides. 100 meters, 150, nearly 200. He was almost ready to turn back when his light caught something on a low pine branch, a small, dark stain, nearly invisible against the bark frozen solid. Blood. Not much, but enough. Camille Mercer had not been thrown from her vehicle. She had cut herself free, taken the thermal blanket from the emergency kit, and walked into the blizzard. She had been thinking. She had been moving under her own power, and she had done all of that before the snow covered everything. He called Captain Briggs and reported what he had found. Briggs listened, then told him the blood was too old to be conclusive, the storm made further searching impossible, and no one was going to risk additional lives on a trail that might lead nowhere. If Everett continued without authorization, he would be operating in a sealed hazard zone. That would mean his job. Everett understood the logic. He didn't argue with it. He called Ruth and asked her to keep Tessa through the night. Then he asked to speak with his daughter. "I'm going back up," he told her. A pause on the line. "Did you find something?" "I found something worth following," he said. "If anything comes through on the scanner at Ruth's, any signal at all, you listen for 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. You hear that, you tell Ruth immediately. You don't wait." "I know," Tessa said. A pause. "Come back, Cha." "I will." He ended the call, loaded his personal gear into his pack, and told no one else where he was going. Before he crossed back into the tree line, he stopped and looked up at the mountain, dark, silent, swallowing the beam of his flashlight like it swallowed everything else that went into it. He thought about the cut seatbelt and the missing thermal blanket and the frozen blood on the pine branch. He thought about all the people who had already decided what the answer was. Then he thought about Lena, not with the usual weight of it, but with something quieter. The question wasn't whether he could correct 4 years ago. He couldn't. The question was what kind of man he was going to be in the hours that were still in front of him. He walked into the dark because he hadn't given up on the answer yet. The trees swallowed him within 50 meters of the road. Everett moved northeast, keeping his flashlight angled low so the beam lit the ground rather than the air in front of him. He wasn't looking for Camille directly, he was looking for what she had left behind. A broken branch at hip height, a scuff mark on exposed rock, the faint compression of snow where a boot had landed and shifted weight. He had learned to read terrain like this from his father, who had learned it from his grandfather, who had tracked deer through Georgia hardwood before either of them was born. He found the first marker 40 minutes in a strip of dark fabric knotted to a branch at eye level. The knot was deliberate. He found a second strip 20 meters further, then a third. She had been marking her own trail, spacing them far enough apart to cover ground, but close enough to stay connected. That took discipline. That took someone who knew that panic was the fastest way to die in the mountains. He adjusted his angle of travel and kept moving. The wind was building from the northwest, driving snow horizontally through the trees in bursts that cut visibility to less than 10 meters. His balaclava iced over twice before he reached the first real obstacle, the wooden bridge that crossed the runoff channel between the upper and lower ridges. The bridge was gone. Not damaged. Gone. The channel ran full and fast beneath him, black water moving under a skim of ice that cracked and shifted as he watched it. He spent 12 minutes finding a crossing point upstream, a place where deadfall had jammed across the channel and held enough weight to get him over. The third step cracked under him, and he went in to the knee. He got across, wrung out his boot liner as best he could with gloved hands, and kept moving. His knee had been bothering him since the afternoon, an old injury from the same winter Lena died, when he had spent 3 days running his own private search along this ridge and had torn something in the joint that never quite healed right. In cold like this, it stiffened until the joint felt like a hinge packed with gravel. He had learned to work through it. The radio clipped to his chest crackled once a burst of static, then went silent. He checked the signal meter. No bars. He was beyond the repeater range now, out past the edge of the county's communication grid. If something went wrong in the next few hours, the only people who would know were the trees. He found a coat button at the base of a spruce, small, dark, with a thread of fabric still attached, stained at one edge. She had been moving along this line, bleeding, but not severely. She was upright. She was thinking. He looked through the trees ahead and confirmed what he already suspected. The old Whitmore Fire Lookout Station sat approximately 2 kilometers south-southeast, the only structure within reasonable reach if someone was moving on foot in deteriorating conditions. He pushed south and moved faster. The lookout station appeared through the trees just as the last usable light faded out of the sky. A single-room log structure on a raised platform, windows, boarded door secured with a latch rather than a lock. One of the boards on the south-facing window had been pried partially loose. Everett climbed the platform steps, lifted the latch, and pushed the door open. The smell hit him first. Wood smoke, faint but recent. His flashlight swept the interior. Overturned table, scattered debris, an old metal stove in the corner with ash still holding heat, and on the floor beneath the table, half covered by a silver emergency thermal blanket, a woman lying completely still. He crossed the room in 4 steps and pressed 2 fingers to the side of her neck. Pulse. Slow and thread-thin but present. He pulled the blanket back to assess. Her right ankle was badly swollen, the boot cut away. She had done that herself probably, when the swelling made it impossible to walk. There was a laceration along her hairline above the left ear, partially closed, but showing early signs of infection, the edges pink and warm in a way that cold skin shouldn't be. Her core temperature was dangerously low, but she was breathing. Everett worked without pausing, rolling out his thermal mat, transferring her onto it, laying his emergency blanket over hers, placing a chemical heat pack against her core and another at the back of her neck. He had done this before in training and in 2 real extractions in his years as a volunteer. He worked from muscle memory. When he had done what he could, he sat back on his heels and exhaled. Then Camille Mercer opened her eyes. She stared at the ceiling for several seconds. Then she turned her head and looked at him, not with fear, but with the flat, evaluating expression of someone who wasn't sure yet whether what they were seeing was real. "You're not hypothermia," she said. Her voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "No," Everett said, "I'm not." She studied him for a moment. "You're with the rescue team." "I was. They called it off 48 hours in." "Then why are you here?" "Because I found blood on a pine branch about 2 kilometers back, and I followed it." She processed that, slowly working through what it meant, calculating the implications. He recognized that kind of thinking. It was the opposite of panic. It was a mind that defaulted to problem-solving even when the body was failing. "Everyone else left," she said. "They made the right call. Storm avalanche risk, no confirmed sign of life." He met her eyes. "I didn't agree with the conclusion." She was quiet for a moment, then, "What's your name?" "Everett Cole." "How bad is it, Everett?" He told her the truth. The ankle was broken, she probably already knew that. The head wound needed treatment he couldn't fully provide out here. Her core temperature was low, but improving. The good news was that she had made a series of smart decisions, taking the thermal blanket marking her trail, finding shelter, staying still once she could no longer walk. Those decisions were the reason she was alive. She absorbed all of that without flinching. Then she asked what the plan was for getting out. He told her about the route in the bridge crossing the terrain between here and the road. With a broken ankle, she couldn't walk it. The snowmobile was a kilometer back on the upper trail. If he could get her to the snowmobile, they had a chance of reaching the road before the storm peaked. 30 seconds later, the sound started. Low at first, a deep, sustained rumble from somewhere above on the ridge, then louder, faster, closer. Everett grabbed Camille by the arm and pulled her toward the interior wall, putting the stove between them and the door. The avalanche passed 200 meters to the north, but it came down the channel that ran alongside the upper trail. When the noise stopped, Everett went to the door and looked out into the dark. He could hear the silence where the trail used to be. The snowmobile was gone. The route back was gone. He closed the door, went back inside, and sat down across from Camille. She looked at him. "That was your trail?" "Yes." "So we're not going anywhere tonight?" "No." She pulled her half of the thermal blanket tighter and said, "Then we'd better make this last." They rationed his supplies carefully, half of 1 energy bar each, 2 measured cups of water heated on the stove, using the last of the dry wood scraps in the corner. Camille inventoried the emergency kit with the focused efficiency of someone accustomed to assessing resources before making decisions. When she finished, she set it aside and looked at her ankle. Without a word, she tore a long strip from the hem of her undershirt, then another, and began winding them firmly around the joint, overlapping each pass with careful tension. She did it correctly. Everett noted that, and noted that she noticed him noticing. "My brother was a wilderness EMT," she said without looking up. "Owen. He spent 2 years doing search and rescue in the Sierra Nevada before he..." She tied off the last strip and tested the tension. "He used to make me practice this kind of thing when we were kids. Said I needed to know how to take care of myself because he wasn't always going to be there." "Was he right?" She looked up. "He died 3 years ago, so yes." Everett didn't fill the silence. He let it sit the way silence deserved to sit when someone said something true. After a while, Camille said, "What actually made you come back?" "Not the blood on the branch. You would have reported that and gone home if that's all it was." Everett looked at the stove. The coals were fading. He thought about how much of this to say, then decided there wasn't much point in measuring it out carefully when they were sitting in the same situation. "My wife died on this mountain," he said. 4 years ago. She went off the road about 3 kilometers from where your car is now. The team searched for 3 hours before the weather shut them down. They went back at first light." He paused. By then it was too late. Camille was quiet. "You think you could have saved her?" "I don't know, maybe not, but I chose to trust the process. I didn't go up myself that night, and I've been living with that choice ever since." She looked at him steadily. "So tonight is about her." "Tonight is about you," he said, "but yeah, her too." Camille was silent for a long moment. Then, You can't keep going up mountains alone trying to correct something that already happened. I know that. Do you? Everett looked at her. I have an 8-year-old daughter at home who's been waiting for me to figure that out. That landed. He could see it on her face, not pity, but recognition. The kind that comes when someone hears something that fits a shape they've been carrying without knowing it. I don't have anyone waiting for me, Camille said quietly. My assistant noticed I was missing because I missed a meeting. My emergency contact is my law firm. She said it without drama, the way you state a fact that stopped hurting a long time ago, but never actually disappeared. After Owen died, I just kept working. It was easier than everything else. I built a company. I'm good at that. She looked at her wrapped ankle. I sat on that floor for 2 days thinking I was going to die out here, and the thing that scared me most wasn't losing the company. It was realizing I'd built a life that nobody was going to notice was gone, except in a quarterly report. Everett didn't offer her anything easy in response. He thought she would have resented it. Instead, he said, "Your brother taught you to bind a wound, mark a trail, take the thermal blanket when you needed it. You made it 2 kilometers on a broken ankle in a blizzard, and you kept your head the entire time." He looked at her steadily. He didn't teach you those things because he was worried about you. He taught you because he already knew who you were. Camille held his gaze for a long moment. Then she looked away, not dismissively, but the way people look away when something has gone in deeper than they expected. After a silence, she said, "There's something in the far corner, behind that storage rack. Looked like an old radio unit. I couldn't reach it from the floor." Everett stood and crossed to the corner. Behind a rusted metal shelf, he found a hand-crank emergency signal transmitter, the kind the Forest Service had installed in remote stations decades ago. He brought it to the light. The casing was cracked. One connector was corroded, but the hand crank turned, and when he pressed the test button, the indicator needle moved. "Can you work with this?" he asked. Camille reached out and took it from him. She turned it over in her hands, examined the corroded connector, pressed the button twice, watched the needle. She had the focused expression of someone running a calculation she intended to get right. "Give me some time," she said. She worked on the transmitter while Everett watched the door and listened to the storm. 40 minutes passed. Then Camille set the unit on the floor between them. "It won't broadcast far," she said. "But if someone is running a scanner in the valley, they might catch it." Everett looked at the transmitter, then at her. "Tomorrow," he said. "We wait for the storm to ease, we get the signal out, and we move." Neither of them said what they were both thinking, that everything depended on the storm on the transmitter, holding on someone in the valley being in the right place at the right time. Too many variables, not enough certainty. But for the first time since Everett had walked through the door, Camille wasn't waiting to be rescued. She was working the problem with him. That changed the weight of the room. Not by much, but enough. Everett fed the last piece of dry wood into the stove, pulled his pack close, and settled in for the night. Outside, the mountain made no promises. The tree came down at 3 in the morning. There was no warning, no creak, no preliminary shudder. One moment, Everett was half asleep against his pack, and the next, the entire north wall of the station exploded inward. He was on his feet before he understood what had happened. He grabbed Camille by the shoulder of her jacket and pulled her sideways across the floor as a section of roof came down where she had been sitting. The stove tilted off its base and sent a spray of dying coals across the floorboards. The transmitter disappeared under a beam that hit the floor with enough force to crack it down the center. When the noise stopped, Everett ran a mental check. His left arm had caught the edge of a falling plank, not deep but bleeding. His right knee had taken his full weight on the hard drop, and the grinding sensation told him the joint was worse than before. He looked at Camille, who was on her hands and knees, covered in debris but upright. "Are you hurt?" he said. "No." She looked at the beam across the transmitter. "That's gone." "Yes." She pushed herself upright and looked around the station. The north wall was open to the sky. Snow was already blowing through the gap in sheets. The temperature in the room had dropped 5 degrees in under a minute and would keep dropping. There was no more wood. Most of their remaining supplies were buried under the collapsed section. Staying was no longer an option. Everett pulled out his map angled his flashlight across it, and found what he was looking for: a maintenance access tower on the eastern ridge, approximately 2.8 kilometers from their current position. He had passed within a kilometer of it on his way in. The Forest Service had fitted those towers with emergency equipment as standard: a hand-operated radio transmitter hardwired to a dedicated frequency designed to work when everything else had failed. He showed Camille the map. She studied it without speaking, running the calculation he was already running. 2.8 kilometers, 1 broken ankle, 1 damaged knee, open terrain in the dark with a storm that was only now beginning to ease. He didn't soften the numbers. She wasn't the kind of person who needed that. "Okay," she said. She folded the edge of her thermal blanket over her shoulder and began moving toward the door. They fashioned a crutch from the straightest piece of fallen timber Everett could find. He wrapped his knee with the compression bandage from his kit, cinched it tight, and shouldered the pack. Outside, the wind had dropped from a roar to a sustained push, manageable but only just. The storm's worst had passed. He didn't know how long the window would stay open. They moved. Camille's pace was slow but consistent. Within the first 100 meters, she had learned how to drive the crutch to take the pressure off her ankle on each step. She moved without complaining, without asking how much further, without stopping except when Everett stopped to check his bearings. She never wasted energy on words that didn't solve anything. The terrain flattened briefly after the first kilometer, then the grade increased as they pushed toward the eastern ridge. Everett felt his knee with every step, a deep grinding ache that spiked when he hit ice and had to correct his footing. He managed. Then, 70 meters from the base of the tower, he didn't. His right foot broke through a crust of ice over a shallow depression and the leg went sideways. He caught himself on his hands, but the knee had already torqued past its limit. He sat in the snow for a moment, breathing carefully, then stood up. 2 steps confirmed what he already suspected: he could not carry his full weight on the right leg and also climb the remaining grade. Camille had stopped and was watching him. "Give me the map," she said. Give me the map, Everett." He gave her the map. She studied it briefly, then folded it and handed it back. "The access ladder goes up the east face," she said. "There's a platform at the top. The transmitter will be in a weatherproof housing, probably a red or yellow box, hand crank on the left side." She adjusted her grip on the crutch. "You told me the signal. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. I send it on repeat until someone picks it up." "Your ankle—" "I'll manage a ladder," she said, and then more quietly, "You stayed on this mountain for me when everyone else decided I wasn't worth the risk. I'm not walking away from you at the base of a tower." He looked at her. She looked back without any performance in it, not bravado, not false confidence. She had made a calculation, and she was telling him the result. "If the transmitter is damaged when you get up there," he said, "come back down. Don't—" "I'll come back down," she said, "and you'll still be here." She moved past him and up the slope. He watched her go, the crutch driving into snow, the broken ankle swinging clear on every step, the slow, steady progress of someone who had decided they were going to reach the top. He lowered himself to the ground, put his back against a tree, and watched her move toward the tower. She reached the base. She tested the ladder with one hand. Then she started climbing one-handed on the crutch side, right hand gripping each rung, the broken ankle tucked against her leg on every upward move. 14 rungs to the platform. He counted every one. At the top, her figure disappeared onto the platform. He waited. The mountain was very quiet now, the storm's last breath moving through the pines in long, low passes. Then, faint but unmistakable in the still air, he heard it. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. A pause. Then again, 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. She sent it without stopping. He pressed his back against the tree and breathed and counted the repetitions and let himself believe it might work. At the Emergency Management Center at the base of Cedar Ridge, the overnight duty officer was reviewing weather reports when the signal came through on the secondary scanner just before 6 in the morning. Weak, fragmented, but unmistakably deliberate. He reached for the log to record it as probable interference. He stopped when he heard a voice behind him. Ruth Lawson had brought Tessa to the center 3 hours earlier after Everett's radio went silent, and she had spent 2 hours standing in her kitchen, unable to convince herself that no news was good news. She had put Tessa's coat on, driven to the center without calling ahead, and told the night supervisor that Everett Cole was on that mountain alone and somebody needed to be listening. They had let them stay. Tessa was sitting across the room, wrapped in a blanket, watching the scanner with the focused patience that was entirely her father's. When the signal came through, she was on her feet before the duty officer had finished reaching for his pen. "That's not interference," she said. The officer looked at her. She was 8 years old and speaking in a tone he associated with people twice her age. "3 short, 3 long, 3 short," she said. "It's an emergency signal. My dad taught me." She walked to the scanner and pointed at the frequency display. "That's coming from the Eastern Ridge, the maintenance tower up on the access trail." The officer looked at the frequency. He looked at the girl. He looked at the frequency again. Ruth Lawson put her hand on Tessa's shoulder and said to the duty officer, "You should make the call." He made the call. The helicopter came up the Eastern Ridge 40 minutes later, searchlights sweeping the slope. Everett heard it before he saw it and fired his last flare, the one he had been saving since he left the road the previous evening. The light caught the smoke and the helicopter corrected course. When the crew reached him, he was on his feet. His knee was failing, but he was standing because he had decided that was how they were going to find him. He pointed up at the tower without preamble. "There's a woman on that platform. Broken ankle. 3 days of exposure. She comes down first." She came down first. They were airlifted to Cedar Ridge Memorial in the same helicopter. Everett had a fractured fibula, a severely torn ligament in the knee, and mild hypothermia. The cut on his arm needed 8 stitches. Camille required surgery on the ankle and treatment for the scalp infection, but sustained no lasting damage. She was out of surgery in 4 hours. The first call Everett made when he had a phone in his hand was to Ruth. Tessa answered on the second ring. He didn't say anything right away. She didn't either. Then she said, "I heard it, Cha, just like you taught me." "I know," he said. "I heard you too." The resolution that followed was not dramatic. It was specific. The hospital media liaison handed Camille a prepared statement before she was fully out of recovery, a carefully worded document that credited the official search and rescue effort and mentioned Everett in a single subordinate clause. The board had concerns about optics. The statement was designed to move the story forward without inviting questions about why the official search had ended when it did. Camille read it once and handed it back. In front of the cameras outside the hospital 2 days later, she said clearly and without notes that the official search had ended 48 hours before she was found, and that the man who came back was a county snowplow operator who had returned alone on the strength of a frozen blood stain on a pine branch without authorization, without backup, and without any guarantee that he was going to make it home. "This man did not know me," she said. "He did not know what I could offer him. He did not know if he would survive the night. He came back because he found one reason to believe I was still alive, and he decided that one reason was enough." She paused. "I want people to understand what that actually means. It means he chose not the odds, not the protocol, not the safe decision. He chose to believe that a life is worth pursuing past the point where it becomes statistically inconvenient." Everett was reinstated without disciplinary action after the department reviewed his findings and confirmed that the evidence he had identified was valid. He sat down with Captain Briggs 3 weeks later and agreed to help design a secondary volunteer protocol, a defined process that allowed experienced searchers to continue in specific conditions without a single person having to act alone. Camille funded the equipment. She asked Everett what the team needed. He told her, and she provided it without ceremony and without using it to place him in a position of owing her anything. That was the whole transaction. She came back to Cedar Ridge the following month, not for a ribbon cutting, not for a press appearance. She came for a school performance that Tessa had mentioned offhandedly in a phone call Camille had not expected her to make. Camille arrived before curtain and sat in the third row. She stayed until the lights came up. During the second number, Tessa spotted her from the stage, and for a fraction of a second her face did something that Everett sitting beside Camille had not seen it do in a very long time. Something that was simply uncomplicated. On the walk out of the auditorium, Tessa moved to Camille's left side without being asked. Nobody mentioned it. On the evening of the new station's opening, Tessa hung a drawing on the wall of the equipment room. 3 figures in front of a mountain, a man, a woman, a girl. Beneath it, in careful handwriting, "Family is the people who keep looking for you." Later that night, Everett and Camille stood on the station's front steps. The first snow of the new season was coming down light, unhurried, the kind that covered everything gently and without urgency. Camille looked out at the mountain. "Do you still stop when you see something that doesn't look right?" "Yes," Everett said, "but now I think about the drive home at the same time." She reached over and took his hand. He let her. The snow kept falling. Cedar Ridge went quiet the way small mountain towns go quiet in winter, not empty but settled. Somewhere inside, Tessa was helping Ruth wash the coffee cups from the opening. Through the window, her voice carried out to them, ordinary and unguarded, the voice of a child who was not worried about what the night would bring. That was what Everett would carry longest after everything. Not the mountain, or the cold, or the long walk to the tower, the sound of his daughter's voice from inside a lit room on a winter night while he stood outside and was not afraid to go back in. Some things are worth finding your way home for, and sometimes all it takes is one person who refuses to stop looking to remind you that you're one of them. If this story stayed with you, it was meant to. Because the truth is, most of us will never face a blizzard on a mountain. But most of us know what it feels like to be the person still searching when everyone else has moved on. And most of us know what it means to finally have someone waiting at the door. If that resonates with you, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it today.